And just to say, welcome everybody. Nice to see you all, or at least to know you're there. I will be sharing the link to the talk that Rachel's going to give us in a minute, and also the slides and also the chat. If you want to put any contact details in the chat, please do that. We'll just do a quick round of introductions in a minute. This is the second of the drop-ins, as we call them, that we've hosted, just an hour. And basically, as Richard will know, because he came to the first one, the idea is to have a bit of a sort of stimulus by way of a presentation at the start, and then to really hear from you what issues, discussion, ideas, thoughts you have around the topic. I think the gardening one was quite useful. We got into talking about peat-free compost, I seem to remember, and other things like that, which was quite interesting. And we'll see where it goes. Do some quick intros. Simon.
Yeah, so I'm Simon, General Manager of Wales Community Hospital Trust, which is a weird and wonderful charity in North Norfolk. It does a bit of everything, but we do run a suite of exercise classes out of here. But we are beginning to struggle with participants. So hopefully there'll be some hints and tips on how to get them re-engaged again.
Excellent. That's very good, helpful. Rachel from
Hi,
Wales.
everybody. I'm Rachel Cooke from Active Norfolk. My role's insight and evaluation, so it's kind of utilising data to better understand our communities and the work that we do. I think I'll leave it at that because you'll be hearing more from me.
Well, thank you very much. Sarah.
Hello, I'm recently in post the new county officer for Norfolk ALC. So we spread information out to all the parish and town councils in the area in Norfolk. So we obviously, people will come to us with different pieces of information they want to get out, and we'll put them together with newsletters and things like that and send them out for you.
So you can publicise exercise classes and things like that, perhaps?
Yeah, possibly, yeah.
Yeah, excellent, thank you. Sally, nice to see you.
Hello. Yeah, I'm Sally Medler. I'm the founder and care farm coordinator of Lingwood Care Farm. We're sort of halfway between Norwich and Great Yarmouth. So we're just a mile off the A47. We have mainly adults and up to 10 people with a defined need come onto the farm. And they're supported by staff and volunteers. So we're quite a small care farm.
Great, thanks, Sally. And Richard, finally.
Yeah, I'm Richard Beerman. I'm chair of the Grapes Hill Community Garden in the centre of Norwich. It's also, can you hear me okay? It's saying my connection's a bit, okay, fine. I'm also chair of Norwich Cycling Campaign. And as we have limited parking there, we've installed bike racks in our garden, which have proved to be very popular. I'm very interested in why promoters of exercise don't do enough more to promote active travel to and from all their sessions. And I think that's something that's quite important. And I'd like to hear your views on that.
Right, well, yeah, we're starting with some interesting questions right at the beginning. Excellent, thank you all. I think you probably all know me, Nigel Boulder, convener of the Norfolk Green Care Network. Been going for a couple of years now. And as I was saying at the beginning, this is the second of our drop-ins, very much an experimental idea, where we have an initial presentation and then we open up for questions, discussion and sharing ideas, experiences and so on and so forth. So it'll be interesting to see where this one goes today. I was going to say, but it's now stopped, that you could probably hear some play noises going in the background because my neighbour's children were very active from about 10 minutes ago in the garden on some sort of water play. So that's a good form of exercise, I think. I'm very keen on the idea of natural play. I used to be a play area designer, and I visited one that I did over in Emneth a few days ago, and I was very pleased to see that it was pretty much in the way that it had been left about 10 years ago, with lots of mounds and tree trunks and all sorts of stuff which children can make use of. So that's my angle on this. And if I was a bit fitter, I'd get a bit more exercise, I suppose, if that's not a contradiction. Anyway, without further ado, Rachel, over to you.
Okay. Hi everybody. So I'm just going to share a presentation, but I'd like to keep it quite informal. So if you've got any questions, there we go. Can you see the screen that's the presentation? Yeah. Yeah. Perfect. It's just easier than I look at that, and I'm looking at you guys as well. So just a little bit about Active Norfolk. I don't know if many of you are familiar with us as an organisation, but in a nutshell, we're a strategic organisation. We're funded mainly by Sport England, but we receive lots of other bits and contributions from local authorities. We apply for funding to do various things. So it can be a bit of a melting pot. We tend to work with a wide range of partners at all different levels, really, in terms of working with some local authorities and other parts of the system, health partners and, you know, community organisations, that kind of thing. And we're hosted by Norfolk County Council, and you can find equivalent organisations to us in each of the counties across England as well. So what we're about is that we believe that physical activity is beneficial to everybody, and that everybody should have that chance to enjoy the benefits of an active lifestyle. I'll go through some of the benefits a bit later, but in a nutshell, we work with lots of different partners to champion the benefits of physical activity and to work with them in a way to help more people be active in Norfolk. We work mostly at the system level, so that's we're trying to influence decisions and shift the system in favour of physical activity. So this can include things like influencing the planning system to consider access to green space and active travel in their decisions. Okay, we recently launched our 2021 to 2026 strategy, and this has a couple of main areas which can be seen in this kind of jet engine sort of looking graphic that we've got here. But basically there's 4 key areas that we focus on in terms of promoting physical activity and having an impact. That's children and young people, strengthening communities, health and well-being, and active environments. And then around there you've got the principles of the ways that we work, so working in partnership, adapting as we learn, basing our decisions on insight and information, and always striving to make a positive difference, as well as looking to tackle inequalities and address the present whilst also shaping the future. So I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the different benefits of physical activity. It's quite a wonder sort of activity and behaviour, in that it can achieve a lot of benefits for individuals, both short and long term. The interesting thing about physical activity is that it has a lot of the same benefits as spending time outdoors. So activity outdoors almost equals sort of double benefit. So what I've got here is I've listed the benefits that are evidenced from physical activity, and I've included an asterisk next to the ones that also are improved by spending time outdoors. So in terms of the short term, it can improve your sleep. Literally the same day as doing exercise can improve your sleep. It gives you a source of enjoyment, a way of meeting people and socialising. It can give you a real mood boost. It can increase your metabolism, relieve stress, improve your cognition, and help you maintain strength, balance and motor skills. But as well as that, in terms of the long-term benefits, it can prevent or help you manage a number of health conditions. So these include stroke and heart disease, hypertension, diabetes, cancer, depression, dementia, osteoporosis and back pain. So as you can see from that list, you know, as we all know, being active is good for you. I'm just going to let the dog out. She's there, boring at the door. Come on. Sorry about that. So just a bit to tell you about the makeup of Norfolk, I suppose. In terms of physical activity, over a quarter of adults in Norfolk are inactive, and that means that they do less than 30 minutes of physical activity a week. So when we talk about physical activity, we mean activity that gets you a little bit hot, raises your breathing and heart rate somewhat. So something like going for a brisk walk. So doing less than 30 minutes of physical activity is basically really not great for you. there becomes a point where if you're doing 30 minutes or more, there's a huge increase in the benefits. So the thing with physical activity is there's not really a limit to how much you can do and the benefits that you can achieve. And we try and encourage people to do a little bit each day and just try and incorporate it into their life to get those health benefits, really. So 60% of Norfolk's population are over 65. No, 60% of Norfolk 65 plus population live in a rural area, so may have less access to various forms of physical activity. 4 in 10 children do less than 30 minutes of activity a day, and that's less than half of the guideline amount. So as you can see, inactivity is quite a large problem. It's a large problem nationally as well as for the county. Currently, more than 140,000 people in Norfolk live in areas categorised as deprived and falling in the most deprived 20% in England. We also have 2 out of 3 adults in Norfolk who are overweight, and almost 3,000 deaths between 2017 and 2019 were considered preventable. As well as 24% of adults have high anxiety, and 1 in 10 are diagnosed with depression. And lastly, 1 in 10 children aged 5 to 16 also have a mental health condition. So there's all of these different things in Norfolk that are prevalent that physical activity can potentially form part of the solution and the management of. And that's something that at Active Norfolk that we're really interested in, is how we influence decisions to help physical activity become part of the solution to some of the problems that exist in the system for Norfolk. It's important to understand that physical activity is that different people are more or less likely to be physically active, but it's not just down to individual behaviour in terms of choice or lifestyle or biology or genetics. There are wider determinants that come into play that mean that somebody is more or less likely to be physically active. Parts of society that make it easier or harder for people to be active. So these are things such as social, economic, cultural and environmental factors. And in the UK, you're less likely to be active if you are female, if you're older, if you have a disability or long-term condition, as well as or a mental health condition, if you belong to an ethnic minority group, if you're LGBTQ+, or if you're part of a lower socioeconomic group. And the thing is with these inequalities is they actually stack up on each other as well. So if you suffer from more of these, if you're in more of these categories, you're even more, you're even less likely to be as active, if that makes sense. So this map shows the levels of inactivity. So people doing adults doing less than 30 minutes of physical activity across Norfolk, so how prevalent that is in the population. So the darker areas show a higher prevalence of inactivity in those middle super output areas, which is just a geographical unit used to separate parts of the country. So what you can see from this is actually that, you know, there's some areas of the county where there's much higher inactivity rates, and that goes back to some of the things that we talked about in terms of inequalities and determinants of physical activity. I think what's really interesting about looking at this map is that you can see that Kings Lynn, Thetford, Great Yarmouth, some of these areas with higher levels of inactivity, actually anecdotally, you know, those places, and they don't have poor access to green and blue space necessarily. So it's people are inactive, but maybe have, you know, a quite well provided for in terms of the local resources to be active outdoors. So how do we look to encourage that behavioural shift and get people utilising some of the natural resources in their local neighbourhood? And that's one of the things that we're interested in looking at Active Norfolk. We've got some work lined up to look at green infrastructure and the spaces that we have across Norfolk, how accessible they are in practical terms, how easy they are to get to, what facilities they have, and where they are in relation to high levels of inactivity, and is there anything we can do to shift behaviours to encourage people to utilise those spaces better? Do they know they exist, for example? Another thing that we're doing at Active Norfolk to improve access to physical activity and the outdoors is a piece of work called On the Move Outdoors. This piece of work aims to bring people accessible, disability-friendly walks across Norfolk so that everyone can get moving. What it is there's a group called the Disability Real Action Group of Norfolk, also known as the Dragons, and they go round, they take a group of people with disabilities, young people, and they review how accessible different walks and trails are, and then they write it up and advise people on the kind of the provision for that walk and that activity, looking at facilities such as parking, toilets, and how easy it is for people with disabilities to access. And so if you'd like to look at those, they're on our website, and the link is included in the title at the top. And this is, I think, will be of interest to most of you, is that one of the areas that we look to make a difference in Norfolk is we know that there's a wealth of different opportunities out there for people to be active. We know that there's lots of facilities in terms of leisure centres, parks, but also small scale providers operating in village halls and community centres. There's lots of that available, but actually it can be quite hard to find out about opportunities that are maybe even just around the corner. So one of the things that we've looked to do strategically is to provide a platform that's really user-friendly, really useful for both the provider and for the public looking for an activity, to help them navigate what's available in their local area. So what I'll do is I'll just quickly get up our Every Move activity finder. So this is it. It's really colourful, vibrant, not sporty. It's been designed to be friendly and easy to use for the user. This is something that I think it would be great if all of you could familiarise yourselves with. And basically it's set up to help you find an activity for you nearby. So the search engine works, you can leave it on find an activity, or you can choose something more specific. So if I say get outdoors, and then I put in a postcode, and then I say I'm interested in walking, for example, it's then going to show me here a number of different opportunities across the county. Obviously, I don't necessarily want to drive very far, so then I can narrow down my search by a few miles. And that then gives me a few options locally, which I can then peruse in this list here. And so you can choose one that looks like it's of interest, and it gives you all of the information that you should need to know to then go and take action and to join that activity. So what the activity is called, the different categories and who it's suitable for, a little description, information of where to go, when it is, and also down the bottom, all the contact information that you need. So if you've got any further questions, you can contact the organiser, which is Epic Norfolk, and also it details the facilities that will be available at the site as well. So it's a really useful resource. It's free. It's free for people to put their activities onto. And then do that again. Oh, that's not really what I wanted, but there we go. What we'll have to do. Okay. And so at the moment it lists activities that are being provided by somebody, but we have development plans for it to show where natural spaces are and to offer interactive routes that people can follow in those green spaces as well, so that it encourages people to just do self-directed activity, to access a park nearby that they didn't necessarily know about, or any other kind of green space that's suitable, or to follow a specific trail or route. Okay. And we're reaching the end of the presentation. So one of the things to take away from it is if I can ask you to make other people aware of the Every Move platform as a place to find out about activities, or if you know of activities that are going on, encourage them to be listed on Every Move, because we are constantly working with, we're constantly working to market and promote the system, but also we're working with the health system. So looking to get people prescribing activity, recommending the platform as a place to find a suitable activity to start their exercise journey. So that would be really helpful. And then lastly, I wanted to leave it open to the floor for the discussion, but also to think about what can the Green Care Network do to help encourage more people to be physically active outdoors.
Thank you, Rachel. You leave me with a very interesting question, really. We'll come back to that in a minute, but can I just pick up on the activity finder, which I had some discussions with your colleagues about when it was being set up, and I know that we've put a link to it on our network website.
Yeah.
But it's made me think maybe we ought to give it more prominence, particularly as you're talking about it developing now into something that looks to be really very useful. Have you had any sort of feedback so far? It's been going a few months now, I think, hasn't it?
Yeah, so it's been really positive. People have really liked it, and we've had a good level of traffic. We had, I think there's over 500 activities on there now, but it's always been, for me and Gareth, who organises it, an ambition to make it not just activities that happen at a certain time in a certain place, but actually help people direct their own activity, because we know that the people who are least likely to be active maybe don't have a really easy routine to navigate and have to just fit bits in when they can, or don't have the transport, or particularly now with the cost of living crisis, things that they need to pay for. So that's something that's all an ambition of the project, really.
Yeah, I suppose just picking up what I was saying, I mean, and in a sense trying to answer your question that you pose, I mean, one of the things I think the network can do is to make people aware of that very useful platform, and encourage them to spread the word amongst them, their own organisations and networks and so on. So that's something I can certainly commit to doing and going back and having a look at, perhaps from our own website.
Yeah,
very, very interesting presentation. I mean, some very worrying statistics as well, I have to say, and not perhaps surprising. We had a couple of issues flagged up at the beginning. I see Richard's already in with his hand up. Richard, over to you first. Go on.
That's fine. The others have a go as well. Just that you talk about the website. Have you got links with the Norwich City Council website, Lumi? Because that's got a number of organisations and activities in their area on there, also dealing with classes and sporting and all types of activities, actually.
That's a really good question. I know that we're aware of Lumi. I don't know if we've got like a feed running between the two websites, but yeah, that would be good to build on what they've got.
Yeah, but they're fairly well established. They've been going for a number of years, so it takes time for people to gravitate to a new site, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And that's why we focus a lot around user experience and user testing, because if somebody goes to your site and they don't have a good experience, they're unlikely to return.
Yeah. There's also, which Richard will be aware of, the Outdoor Projects Network in Norwich, which I think is linked in some way to Lumi, isn't it?
Well, they use Lumi as an advertising platform. Lumi is essentially a Norwich City Council sponsored platform to advertise classes, courses, events that people can join in across the city.
Might be worth following up then, Rachel, on that. Yeah, thanks very much. Any other points people want to raise? Simon, you raised an issue at the beginning about participation, I think. Was that right?
Yeah, so we're all over this. We're all over it. So that's my classes.
There we go.
But we've never had any traction from it.
Okay, yeah.
So it's whether or not, the issue we have here is the nearest gyms are Sheringham and Fakenham. They're an Everyone Active gym. The one in Sheringham, which is our nearest competitor really for the amount of classes that we do compared to them, won't take on more instructors because they haven't got enough memberships, but they knocked it down at the beginning of COVID and they've only just opened it again. So people round here are quite reticent about going to something. There isn't anything for them to go to anyway. So we put together this whole sort of collage of exercise classes. 4 months ago, we were at capacity and waiting list. 2 months later, we've cancelled them all because we've got no buy-in. Now, is this a cost of living thing that's being seen across everything? Or is it just we're in a good summer now, there's no COVID, even though it's rife here in Wales. We're all going to the beach.
Yeah. So we do usually experience seasonal trends, and that actually summer's the hardest time. A lot of people kind of think, oh, people won't want to do anything until summer because of weather being a kind of barrier, but actually a lot of activities, people have more structure and aren't taking holidays and have childcare and things. So summer can be quite a difficult time. I do think you're probably right about the cost of living as well. I think it's particularly hitting the leisure centres and all of those. So one thing we have found can be quite good for engagement is if you can get on Facebook groups that are already about the community and promote them there. It seems that Facebook as a platform likes to promote that function. So if you go into a group that's about Sheringham or Wells or wherever, and is about that neighbourhood and kind of promote your activities, you might find that helps. But yeah, it's quite a difficult economic climate at the moment for activity.
It's quite interesting, your statistics that you showed that you're less likely to exercise if you're a woman and older. And our demographic is older women.
Yeah.
But all of our classes are full of older women.
Yeah, I mean, exercise classes particularly are popular with women. So that doesn't really surprise me, but yeah, it is interesting.
It's the men that we've had problem trying to attract. We have 3 men in our Pilates class, which apparently is quite unusual.
Yeah.
But apart from that, we can't get men to do pump, we can't get men to do combat.
No.
I mean, going on the outside bit of it, our yoga's moved outside, our seated exercise has moved outside, Pilates is going outside. So we've got this garden that you can see behind me that looks like a pub garden, but it's not, I trust you. We've got this lovely outside space that looks over a field. So, we've benefited from that. But as I said, it's just dwindling so much. But it's not just us, it's everything in our area. Zumba is folding, Parasize is folding because people aren't coming.
Yeah,
So,
and have you been able to get any feedback from the people who were previously engaged who you've lost, or nothing?
It's a lot of it is if the day's nice, they'd go to the pub or the sailing club.
Yeah.
Go down the beach.
Yeah.
Even though they've paid their membership to come to us, they don't. So some of it is a cost of living. We get that. Some of it is a transport, being in a rural area. We do have some wonderful bike racks, and a lot of people do cycle here, so we're doing well on that one.
That's good.
But we're pulling from villages, and if diesel on the coast here is £2, and you're paying £6 for a class, it's a bit of a... So we're just a bit stuck on where to go next, basically.
Okay.
Can I pick up on that, Rachel? Because I mean, it touches on an issue I seem to remember that came up when we had your colleague Gareth talking about the activity finder, which was about, I suppose, because it's an online resource, that's not going to be necessarily easy to use or attractive to everybody. Being careful what I say here, being of a certain generation, but I'm wondering whether is Active Norfolk attacking this in other ways, using other channels, other ways of raising awareness?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, other than the website, which is designed to the highest accessibility standards, and also a lot of accessible websites don't look very good, but we've made sure that it both meets accessibility standards but also looks good. I don't think that we're doing anything in terms of placing advertising elsewhere that isn't web-based. I guess if there's any suggestions of what we could do in practical terms, one thing to also mention is that we have some funding streams that might be of use. Let me just get out the details, but there's a fund called the Together Fund, and that's a pot of money that organisations can apply to if they are targeting certain audiences who are less likely to be active, and it can be up to £10,000 to apply for a bit of money, and it's kind of to get you through some of these harder times as well. So that could be something that might be of interest to, if you're a community-based organisation, you're eligible to apply for some of that funding.
Yeah, I'll come back, if I may, in a minute on one particular suggestion that might be of interest to you around children and young people. But I think Sarah put her hand up, and then Sally. So Sarah first.
Before doing, well, I still am a parish clerk, I got connected with a sports development officer out of Linsport, out of the Borough Council. And they said that they wanted to promote sport in rural villages and everything else. So particularly Gayton, which I actually live in, I actually got put something on the Facebook page and got quite a few people interested in different things like yoga classes, running groups, etc. Went back, had a meeting with the sports development officer. Yeah, we can do this, we can do that, we can do this. Nothing ever materialised.
Mm-hmm.
So if I did the same thing now, they'll say, well, we did it all last time, you didn't do anything about it, nothing happened with it, so what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the situation. If they say they're going to do something and then you get them all the information, you give them everything that they need. We actually have got a running group in the village now that started up, has been very successful, because we had a gentleman move into the village who is a sports physio person, and he ran every day, and then people were asking questions and stuff, so we started a group.
Mm-hmm.
But there was yoga, Pilates, there was children's activities and everything else, and they put a whole list together of everything that people wanted to do, and she was going to go back work on it. She said, yeah, we won't be able to do everything, but we'd be able to put in a good food for you. But it's never ever materialised, never heard anything from her. Chased her up, still didn't hear anything from her.
Who was that you said?
Sorry?
Who did you say you had that conversation with?
That was the sports development worker who works out of Linsport, which was part of the Kingsland and West Norfolk Borough Council.
Okay. Yeah, says that, alive.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they were left you hanging a bit, basically, is what you're saying, Sarah.
Yeah, they just haven't done anything.
Hmm.
We were talking. We had a situation just prior to lockdown and some at the start of lockdown where we'd got a lot of teenagers and everything else that were causing riot, if you know what I mean, in lots of ways, and they needed something to channel energy from. We asked them whether they could set up something else, some sports thing that could be done through a youth group or something that they could join, and we were prepared to, as a council, to look at it, getting facilities. We've got a basketball hoop, but could we get something else on our playing fields or whatever? And she said, oh yeah, I'll go back and I'll look at it and we'll work it out and I'll come back to it. And just nothing.
Yeah.
It's just been like an empty hole, really.
Yeah. Do you want to come back on that, Rachel, at all or not? I mean, it's a difficult one to answer it, isn't it? Because it doesn't involve your organisation as such. But
no, I can't speculate on what happened there. The problem that we've got is that we don't sit on some money where we decide how it's spent. So what happens is that Sport England or an equivalent funder decides they want to offer funding with certain conditions, and then we most likely coordinate it for them, and you would apply to us and we would check if you met the eligibility criteria and we would work with you to develop your bid. I think that that it would be worth looking at the Together Fund and looking at whether that's something that is suitable. So just to give you a brief understanding of what it is. So the fund supports small local organisations and also community groups that are delivering vital community support. And they're particularly interested in offers for lower socioeconomic group or ethnic diverse audiences, or people with a disability or a long-term health condition. So if you think that some of your offer can cater towards any of those groups, then it looks like you could potentially be eligible to work up a bid.
Okay.
Get some funding for that.
We're not great on having different ethnic things. We're in Norfolk.
No, that is a challenge. It doesn't have to be all of those criteria for sure, but it's just any of those audiences. And yeah, so worth having a conversation about.
Yeah.
Okay. Sally, over to you.
Hi. I feel that probably some of my feedback on the presentation is going to be a little bit negative as well. So I do apologise in advance, because obviously Sarah's now been quite negative about, do you know what I mean? We're sort of saying, oh, this hadn't happened because, and I'm probably going to go down the same line, that I was a health walk leader in Norfolk, and it was supported by health walk coordinators throughout the Broadland, North Norfolk, Norwich area. There was a lot, and funding just stopped. There was loads of health walk leaders, and then suddenly, how were they supposed to be organising walks and things? I mean, it's a few years ago now, and so it just gradually sort of ceased. And I think one of the things is that you get up a good organisation. I mean, the health walk, the book, we had loads of walks every day in different areas, and catered for lots of different needs, and they progressed on to being more for the more fitter people as well as time went on. I trained as a health walk leader and also in Nordic walking, and it's because I think a lot of the problems is, people, you've got the volunteers, you've got the people going along to the walks, everything was well organised, and then funding stopped. And I think perhaps you need to look at, okay, you might fund it at the beginning, but it's your responsibility to make sure that that can stand on its own before funding ends. So perhaps, perhaps start charging people and using that money to go towards funding in the future for the coordinators. But then, as I'm now going to say otherwise, is that as I think Simon said, money is a huge issue at the moment. People just haven't got the money to spend on doing activities and getting there as well, being in a rural place. And also the timing of the activities to try and suit everybody. It's very difficult to get a timing which will suit everybody who might want to use your class. Quite often, you think, oh yeah, I like the idea of that class, and you look at it and you're at work. I'm probably going to be in that class of an older woman who's overweight and unfit, and I'm at work all day. There's not many free activities for me to do in an evening locally. And one of the other things was, you said about helping people, and I know Dragons, I know quite a few people who are within that group, is that it's great that you've got their involvement, but it's how much you listen to what they say, and do you only listen to the bits you can do? Can you work really hard on the bits which are difficult to do? I mean, the changing places facilities, people who need a hoist to go to the toilet. I mean, our local village hall, I worked really hard to try and get a change of places facility in there, and one of the people who was in charge of it said, well, quite honestly, how many people do we have come who's going to use that? And I thought, well, you don't know until you got the facility how many people are going to come and use it, because they can't come because they haven't got the facility to go to the toilet that we take as a right. That, you know, you go into a public place that you can, you know, you can access a toilet. I mean, has Active Norfolk, your base at Eastern College, has that got a change in places toilet in the sports area?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
That has now, has it?
Mm.
So
With a
Sally,
hoist.
just to cut across you a bit, you're raising some very important issues there about,
Yeah.
I guess, access with one of them, isn't it?
Yeah.
And obviously the other things you've mentioned that can often get in the way, if you like, of participation.
Yeah.
Not just money, but there's facilities, there's transport, and all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
If I can just pick up on the access one, and I was interested in what you said, Rachel, about trying to influence the planning system. As an ex-planner, I'm particularly interested in that.
Yeah.
But you know, the provision of what's called green infrastructure or green open spaces, not just in new developments, but I suppose you know, ways in which we can create opportunities for people to get out and about and exercise in existing developments. Could you say a little bit about what Active Norfolk does in terms of trying to influence the planning system, I suppose is what I'm asking. Big question.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because it doesn't sit with me. So I can only give you kind of a high level overview, but we have a colleague called Charlotte, and she works across the environments team at Norfolk County Council and with Active Norfolk, and also Simon Hamilton. Obviously you've emailed these people, and they're slowly trying to raise awareness basically around the importance of good access to green space, active travel, those kinds of things, and influence how those decisions are made. I'm not sure, I don't really know much about the detail of how that's going, to be honest. I think it's just trying to drive change and priorities across the council, particularly around what gets awarded planning, and having that expectation that good quality and accessible green space and walking and cycling provision is included in any new developments. Yeah.
I came across a comment the other day, I can't remember which council it was, but someone had been talking to planners or a planner about the upcoming national developments around called nature recovery networks, nature recovery strategies. You know, this whole idea of trying to improve biodiversity at local level, but equally, you know, providing for humans in terms of connecting with nature and exercise and so on. And this planner said, you know, they were really up for briefing, training, you know, becoming much more aware of this, because it's something that's going to become a central part or a very important part of the planning system, this whole idea of biodiversity net gain and making payments and things like that. So it's something I was going to pick up with Simon. I think it's maybe something that we can push out on a strategic level and try and have some events for planners that raise awareness and maybe provide at least an entry into some of the issues that they're going to be confronting soon.
Yeah, and I think that might be maybe a future topic for your network, because one of the things that we're working, there's a department now that's been established within the environments team at Norfolk County Council called Natural Norfolk, and they're tasked with looking at that biodiversity. They're looking at how they can use like satellite imaging to look at different levels of hedgerows and trees and things, and that's where we're going to also look at mapping all of the bits of green space that are probably accessible. And we're just kind of try and create more information than we currently have really around where are these green spaces, how do they compare in terms of the standard, you know, is that patch enough for the population surrounding it, where do we have issues with inactivity, and how can we match people up with the outdoor space as a place to be active and to get those health benefits. As I showed, you get double the benefits in some ways because there are benefits to being outdoors and to being active.
Yeah, one of the other aspects of that is active travel, isn't it? And Richard, you raised that point early on about a very specific instance of where maybe, you know, it isn't being promoted in the way that it should be. Do you want to just comment on that a bit further?
I think having been a county councillor, Rachel might recognise me from active cycling and walking in Norfolk. I think there's a failure of understanding amongst the planners and the transport planners about what it actually means. And in fact, the amount of money spent on projects like the current Transforming Cities Fund of 32 million that's been largely wasted across Norwich and create traffic chaos for people who want to drive or need to drive anywhere, is producing schemes that just are not fit for purpose. They will not encourage people to get on their bikes because they stop when you most need them. And one of the things the government has moved forward with is cycling infrastructure. It says, do not give up when it gets difficult. It's fine to paint a line on the side of a road and call it a bike lane. But when you get to the big roundabout or the traffic lights at the end, you've got to do something about that as well. You can't just do it piecemeal. We've been banging on about this in urban areas. It's much more difficult. I take the point about rural connectivity. And there's been a lot of talk when I was at county council about bus services, hub and spoke, actually joining up. So you can get a bus to a market town and another bus for another place will actually leave, not have to wait 2 hours and this kind of thing. It's impossible while you've got a free market in the bus services. You can only do that when you've got council control over bus routes and timetables, and buses, especially if we can get them off fossil fuels, are going to have to be the answer. You won't be using your diesel cars after 2030. Well, you won't be able to afford to buy diesel long before then, I should think. So we're going to have to find different solutions at how to get people around. I don't think there's one answer. That's the problem. There's multiple answers and multiple agencies involved in it. And the more networking you can do, and just another point on the website, it's really nice to have another website. But if you dig around, you will find there's lots of websites with green space on already. The Norwich Society, private organisation, just published their report on all the green spaces in Norwich, and there's hundreds of them. So what we need is links to existing facilities rather than creating an overarching new website which has different and possibly out-of-date information. Which brings us right back to the point about continuity in health walks. Great idea at the beginning. If you don't put in thought as to how it goes continuity afterwards, who's going to update the information when it stops happening through Active Norfolk? I'm not being negative. There's lots of good stuff going on. And I think there's a huge amount of voluntary activity going on. But organisations like Active Norfolk and the councils need to spend more time promoting other people's activities rather than building activities of their own.
Interesting. You want to come back on that, Rachel?
Yeah, and that is why we provided a platform, because we think that there's a lot of the opportunities out there and it's more just enabling people to get to them. It's actually really difficult to find out information about what's available and to find out enough information that it counters any barriers to you going. If you don't know how much it costs, or you don't know if there's toilet facilities or what to wear or who to contact or things like that, those all prevent you, even though you're actively looking for an activity, from taking it up. So we want to make that shift from looking into doing as easy as possible. I think I understand your argument about there's existing information elsewhere, but the whole point of the activity finder is presenting that information in a way that's really easy to use. Another point around active travel is we're actually looking to build into the website an option to plan your route there by walking, cycling, public transport, so that it's, that whole kind of user journey.
Yeah, can I just come back briefly on that? Norfolk County Council have the Travel Finder Journey to Work, which I did when I was a cycling champion there. It's completely, it's hopeless. It's not got all the right routes in. It takes you down the main roads where you shouldn't go down, that sort of thing. So it's good to have that, but it has to be done skillfully. The other thing about the website, I don't know whether you know how much broadband width it needs, and we know parts of Norfolk have poor broadband. I tried to log on to the Active Finder website while I was on this Zoom call, and the two won't work together. It just broke down the Zoom connection straight away. And my internet is not bad, it's not brilliant, but it's okay. But if you've got parts of rural Norfolk where they've got poor internet connections, that's another thing to think about. How do we get the information out there? You can't beat the parish magazine in sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm sure the Association of Local Councils lady, hi Sarah, will tell me paper has its place, providing it's of course 100% recycled paper.
Yeah. So really that point that was made before about needing different channels of communication, really very important, isn't it? Sarah, did you want to come in? I had your hand up. You're on mute, Sarah.
We had 2 AGMs last week. I had our own NALC one on the Wednesday, and we had, I don't know whether anybody know him, he's a gentleman who runs Scribe, which is an accounts package that people use, but he diversifies into doing several different things. And he did a talk on basically on travel and everything else, and go through, and apparently there are countries or places within the world now where you basically put in your diary for the day of where you want to be, and how much walking or what you need to do or what you don't need to do, etc., and timings, and you place it all in your diary and it goes onto a website, and basically your transport, your mode of transport will pick you up, take you to A to B, C to D all day long, and it'll combine it with other people that are doing a similar same thing to try and cut down on the amount of transport. And if you want to say that it's lunchtime and you want to walk, it'll plan it so that you can walk from one pickup point to another pickup point. So that was very interesting on how that would
sounds very sophisticated
to work and everything else. And then the other, then I had an SLCC Norfolk AGM on Friday, and we had his name escapes me at the moment, Phil, and I can't think of his surname, who is the director for places at Broad London and South Norfolk. Yes, Courtier, that's right. And he was saying about neutrality and how they're having to cope with it, and how planning is actually stopped in the Brecklands at the moment because they just haven't got like the little builders and that are probably going to end up out of business because, and obviously affordable housing and everything else is going to go down. So trying to expect them to do zero carbon and everything else is just, and they're talking about areas like Loddham and Acle, and that will be, because they're outside of this area neutrality, which goes into the Wensum and the Broads, will become really, there's a lot of green space around them, but will be overtook the development because they can't develop within the boundary.
Yeah, it's actually the as you said, the catchment area of the Wensum and the Broads Authority are the areas affected by this nutrient neutrality constraint, isn't it, issued by Natural England, which they're scurrying around trying to respond to, I think. I wanted to come back, if I may, Rachel, just to the approaches to raising awareness, and just to make something you aware of something that might be helpful. The network has just initiated there's work on a campaign, important word, campaign aimed at expanding nature connection opportunities for children and young people, which could obviously include exercise. It's in its early days. We're aiming to do a launch of this probably at the beginning of October, but we've had a couple of online meetings where there's been a lot of enthusiasm for a wide range of organisations and individuals, and there's now some strands of development work going on in order to develop, if you like, the meat on the bones of what that campaign might look like. I don't think anyone from Active Norfolk is involved in it. That may be down to me not inviting them, I have to say. My apologies. You might want to pick that up and maybe share it with your colleagues, and if there is an interest in getting involved in that, given that's one of the groups that you're trying to focus on.
If you can share any information, I'll send that to our children and young people team.
Happy to do that. Fine. Well, we're coming up to 7 o'clock. Is there any final sort of question or comment people want to make? It's been a very interesting discussion. We've touched on, I think within the time available, obviously we can only touch on some of the important issues. But thank you very much, Rachel, for giving us the presentation and the stimulus. I think it was really helpful, and it's certainly raised a few issues that I think I can take back and start to work on as far as what the network might do, and hopefully other people here today have got something from it to take away and work with in terms of their own needs and so on. So unless there's anything else, I'll say thank you all very much. And I will be sending around and following up email with slides and link to the recording as normal. And we'll see where it takes us. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you. Thank you,
Bye.
Nigel.
Thank you very
Bye.
much.